Good evening and welcome to the History Report. On last week's segment, we investigated the whale hunting practices of the early 19th century and compared them to those of today. Tonight we'll be discussing the similarities between the French Revolution and the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
We have, of course, all heard of the French Revolution, that bloody toppling of the French government in which the heads of practically the entire aristocracy were chopped off.
What caused it, though? To tell us, we have Gwen Cooper, live from 1789 at the storming of the Bastille.
Thanks, Yanto. Yes, here I am at the storming of the Bastille, when the lower classes attacked the Bastille prison, freeing the inmates and obtaining many valuable weapons housed there. Here in France, the social climate is heated, to say the least. Over the past few decades, the monarchy has become more and more withdrawn from the rest of the population. Along with the clergy, they have been raising taxes and prices and using the collected revenues to build palaces and pay servants to hand them glasses of hot chocolate. The lower classes have gotten angrier at the monarchy, and today, the storming of the Bastille marks a turning point for the country. I'm here with Germain Giroux, one of the revolutionaries, working here to bring down the Bastille. Mr. Giroux, what exactly are you trying to accomplish today?
This prison is a symbol of everything we hate about the monarchy. Destroying the Bastille will let the aristocracy know we are serious about demanding our rights. The prison also houses a lot of weapons and ammunition. If they refuse to hear our demands, we will send them running.
And what are your demands exactly?
Well, we commoners are fed up with the nobles living lives of luxury while we sleep in the streets and starve to death. This is our only way to rebel against them. We must resort to violence to demonstrate the seriousness of our situation.
Today, July 14th, the lower class attacks the prison. This event can probably be called the beginning of the French Revolution. Having begun to realize that they could change the way their country was run, the commoners mobilized to act upon this realization. Certainly, some of their inspiration came from the American Revolution, to which, ironically, the French government had contributed enormously. The expenses of that war ultimately buried France in debt, which led to rising food prices and increased taxes, both of which would cause the lower classes to revolt. Back to you, Yanto.
Thank you, Gwen. Curiously enough, there are many similarities between the French Revolution and the Chinese Cultural Revolution, which occurred almost 200 years later.
More on that after the break.
Bread, glorious bread!
If only we could afford it.
Bread, glorious bread!
The kings and queens, they do hoard it.
The famine is destined to spread.
Our children will suffer without it.
We will chop off their heads if they will not give us some bread. Help end children's hunger in China and France.
To donate a loaf of bread, text bread to 31415.
You could save lives.
Welcome back to the History Report. If you're just joining us, we're reporting on the social context of the French Revolution and comparing it to that of the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
So just what are the similarities between the two revolutions? Let's take it to our reporter, Jack Harkness.
Thank you, Susie. Like the French Revolution, the Chinese Cultural Revolution was inspired by the desire for a different form of government. Chairman Mao Zedong, who wanted to purge China of capitalism, set the Cultural Revolution into motion. His goal was to purify China's communist government. Through the actions of his supporters, known as Red Guards, Mao purged the nation of anything that was remotely considered to be capitalist. Today I'm here with Xiaoming Lin, a member of Mao Zedong's Red Guard. Could you describe for us the work that you've been doing with the Red Guards?
Certainly. We have been working to eradicate the four olds from society. We aim to make China red from the inside out.
What exactly are the four olds?
Old customs, habits, culture, and ideas of Chinese society. As Chairman Mao's Red Soldiers, we work to purge these old ideals from China's culture.
And why exactly are you working to achieve this?
The form of government Chairman Mao is working toward is perfect. Once we successfully eliminate all the old ideals and China is made red, we shall focus our energies on making the rest of the world follow our example.
How will the change in government benefit you?
The new form of government will be far better for the people of China. We'll each work for ourselves and the rest of the nation. This change in government will bring prosperity and well-being for the entire nation, and all individuals will be equal and reap the same benefits as everyone else.
It sounds like you're pretty enthusiastic about this significant change. Thank you for your time. Well, that about wraps it up here. Back to the station for more on this Revolution special.
Thanks, Jack.
We have with us in the studio eminent historian Owen Harper, who's here today to give us a better idea of just how the two revolutions can be connected. Care to shed some light on the situation, Mr. Harper?
Of course, Susie. In order to get a better idea of how the two are related as a whole, we need to look at certain details of them that can be connected.
So what are these aspects? What can be connected between the two revolutions?
Well, there's the general purpose of each, for one.
How are they similar? They're entirely different. In the French Revolution, the general population was trying to overthrow the government, and in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the government was basically trying to clean itself up.
True, but in both cases, they wanted the same outcome, a better government, better suited for the majority of people.
That makes sense, but that can't be the only connection.
Quite right. There's another aspect of similarity as well, revolving around the revolutionary literature of the two periods. The French had Les droits de l'homme, or the rights of man, and the Chinese had quotations from Chairman Mao, also commonly called the Little Red Book.
So how do they relate to each other?
Both publications at least partially caused their respective revolutions. In the case of the French Revolution, the rights crafted by the lower classes were their inspiration for changing the way their country was run. In the case of the Chinese Revolution, the Little Red Book, written and published by the government, galvanized many people to join the forces of the revolution and work to change the Chinese culture.
Were these publications the forerunners of Facebook and Twitter? It's interesting that media was so important then, as even 50 years later, today's social media are crucial to the uprisings and protests that are happening currently. Were there any overarching themes that connect the French Revolution with the Chinese Cultural Revolution?
Actually, there were. Even though the two revolutions were almost completely different, as you pointed out earlier, many of the themes and events that inspired them were very similar. In particular, both revolutions were caused by great famine in their respective countries. As your reporter remarked, the French government had spent a lot of their resources on the American Revolution before their own revolution began.
Right. Because of this, the government became poor and had to raise taxes and the price of food.
Exactly. The rising prices, combined with the bad grain harvest, made it almost impossible for the lower classes to get their food they needed to survive. Meanwhile, the aristocracy continued to live extravagantly, ignoring the pleas and the plight of the masses.
I guess it's no wonder they caused the revolution. But what about China? How did that famine compare?
The Great Chinese Famine, like the one in France, was also caused by a poor grain harvest. However, most witnesses and historians say that the Chinese famine was mainly due to the mismanagement of food and funds. Before Chairman Mao came to power, Chinese citizens were forced to cultivate acres upon acres of grain and produce, only to see it carted away to serve the rest of the nation. As we saw immediately before the French Revolution, multitudes of citizens starved to death because they weren't allowed to partake of the food they had grown. The local leaders, on the other hand, enjoyed hearty meals and fine wine every night. Thanks to the efforts of the lower class. Sound familiar?
Indeed. But how did the Chinese famine get resolved? Obviously, the famine in France was resolved through bloody revolution, but the Chinese Cultural Revolution occurred more in the ranks of the government than in the unhappy population.
It was widely believed that the Great Chinese Famine was caused by the government's mismanagement. The lower classes, believing that Chairman Mao had the power to end the famine, unconditionally supported his rise to power. The revolution then proceeded as he'd hoped.
So, Owen, what can you tell us about these results and those of the French Revolution? Did they effectively change the countries for the better?
By its very definition, a revolution changes a country for the better. And this was true in France. Ideals of democracy, liberty, equality, and free speech overtook the nation, and they continue today.
But what about the Chinese Revolution? Were those outcomes as positive?
That's more complicated. Most of the world considers the Chinese Cultural Revolution a negative event, stifling independent thought and leading to the strengthening of communism within the country. Even the Chinese government still limits discussion about it.
So was the outcome entirely negative?
Well, the majority of the Chinese middle class believed that the revolution was actually positive, as the changes it brought about were very beneficial for the group of people who enjoyed better working conditions and enhanced prosperity.
It's interesting that the rest of the world disagrees. So what do you think we can learn from studying these events?
For me, the most interesting part of worldwide revolutions is that one often sparks another. Before the French Revolution, the citizens were inspired by the success of the American Revolution. The Chinese Cultural Revolution, strictly a result of Chairman Mao's visions, didn't resemble our concept of revolution today. However, countries all over the planet influence each other daily, in large matters like revolutions and uprisings, but also in smaller matters as well. The Chinese Cultural Revolution and the French Revolution are two of many monumental historical events that continue to influence countries today.
That's fascinating, Owen. Thanks for coming today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's all for now, folks. See you next time on the History Report.